Today's episode will be a little different. I'm like trying to do different things with like my content and all that. So today's episode we'll be talking about the struggles of teens' mental health, and I really want to get dirty when it comes to the truth about teens' mental health and what's affecting us, especially within, you know, the era of technology that's so fucking modern that anything is just like, you know, accessible, and, you know, we know what's going on by any means, you know. So I hope you guys enjoy, and it'll be more of like a video essay. One thing that I see a lot is that the older generation tend to kind of downplay our struggles, especially when, you know, Generation Z and then, you know, the ones that come after it, that they label us as too sensitive, and also they try to, like, as I said, they try to like downplay it as, oh, we're soft, you know, toughen up, rub some dirt on it, which I don't really agree with, and I don't want to sound too passive, but when it comes to somebody's mental mind and their, you know, their well-being, I feel like it should be, you know, first. At best, you know, it should be your priority by any means. And trauma is one thing that kind of shapes us. You know, what happens to us shapes us throughout our lives, and, you know, the people we meet and, you know, the actions that they do to us kind of also, you know, sharpen our skills, especially when it comes to communication and a bunch of other things. But amongst those is, you know, the serious shit that actually happens. You know, whether it be, you know, abuse, you know, depression, anything that's like occurring, and something that's been spiking around ever since quarantine, and even before quarantine, we had all these issues, and, you know, still do. And I'm not saying those issues are, oh, they're nothing and all that, you know, but we, you know, as you know, the older generation should do is, you know, try to, you know, guide us, and they're not really doing that. So I think in the era of, you know, everybody being accessible to one another, we should try to at least help. And you look at these videos and these topics where it's all the teens' mental health is because of social media, it's because of, you know, staying indoors or lack of communication, which is all true, and that can be true without a doubt. But that shouldn't excuse the fact that a lot of kids are just really lost in what to do, and really lost with their, you know, they don't even know where their head is at in this moment of time. Obviously, I don't have every answer to every question, but what I can do is, you know, use my experience to try to guide and give some keys to people that really need it. You know, obviously I'm not like, I haven't been through some serious shit. Like, I've had some demons in my life, but I wouldn't consider that like worse than somebody that went to Vietnam, or, you know. But I'm not saying you should never downplay your troubles. You know, obviously there may be somebody that's going through something worse, and I'm not saying, oh, that should brighten your day. I'm just saying that, you know, you should always never make your situation lesser than what it is. You know, I just mentioned it earlier, but social media being one of the problems in today's issue amongst teens' mental health is that we will do it for the gram, and we will do it for things before we do it for ourselves, and whether or not it actually benefits us. Now, I'm not saying you can't post, or I'm not saying you can't live or you can't display a certain lifestyle to your peers or to the people, you know, that you follow and your mutuals. But I will say is that we have a very bad issue of doing shit and posting before we actually, you know, think about it and be like, oh. And I'm not saying like posting some controversial shit, but I'm saying that you shouldn't be doing it for other people when it's something that you should be liking and you should be enjoying. For example, like, I don't want to put myself into the mix, but I like sports, and I post a lot about sports, and I post a lot about random things that I enjoy. You know, people may not like it, but, you know, I don't think it's radical. But that's something that I enjoy. I grew up, you know, watching sports. I grew up a fan, and that's it. You know, that's all there need is. That's all that there is to it. You know, and I don't think that people should be like, you know, getting eggs thrown at them because they're doing something and they're like posting too much and they're doing this. Nah, because at the end of the day, fuck what people gotta do. But another thing that is also cancerous is FOMO. And FOMO, you see kids going to parties and all that stuff, just drinking or getting fucking shit-faced everywhere. Now, I'm not one to party. Yes, you could probably tell that because I'm, I don't really dibber dabber in those type of things. I'm not saying I'm a saint by any means, but I will say it's just not my cup of tea. But you see these people get into these situations and these events and be like, oh, like, I like that, or like, I want to be like them. No, you shouldn't. You should never want to be like somebody else. And I know that's like very like harsh to say, but you never want to be. You want to be your own person. And I hope that own person of yours is good. So, but another thing that bothers me about the social media life is that comparison is happening too much, where it's like, oh, like, their people's accomplishments and that, and then like, they're missing something in themselves. You should never value your thing. You should never value your ethics on perception. Because yeah, somebody maybe a trip on fucking Turks and Caicos or Ibiza, fucking get it the best time of their life, or somebody posted something, but that shouldn't like fucking downplay your life, bro. If you're on your 2 feet and you got a roof over your head and you're doing just fine for yourself, fuck them. I know it sounds like a negative approach, but you really just gotta, like, I'm not saying be an ass or like, oh, like hate, like you don't gotta hate, but you shouldn't just downplay, or you shouldn't show your like emotions because, oh, like this person's, oh, I think this person's doing better than me. No, never think that. No, really don't. And I know I know every adult probably said that, but coming from an 18-year-old that like has a lot to learn as well, I feel like once you realize that shit so sooner, it's gonna be so much better. And Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor at the time, he has a book called Meditations that I highly suggest that you guys read. He talks, he doesn't have a quote necessarily, but he talks about ego, which I'm gonna talk about later in the video. But you should never, like, the value of perception of others is so empty. Like people's opinions are very empty, and you should never you shouldn't like let that be all, like that shouldn't be your like your bump in the life where it's like, oh, like this person said that or that person said this. No, like do what you like, and don't fucking like dictate. Don't let others dictate what you want to do. If you want to if you like coloring books, so be it. You like fucking coloring books. If you like, if you like darts, like throwing darts, by all means. But don't let people tell you otherwise, that it's lame or it's that. No, fuck them. Dead ass. Now, ego and humility, two topics that I'm very, I guess, wouldn't want to toot my own horn, but very educated about. Ego, I feel like, is being disguised as an insecurity, especially nowadays, where I'm sure you heard it all. Like people, just people with high egos, smart asses, and all that. Which is fine, it's okay to have some sort of pride, but when you have this craving to need, or having this craving to win every argument, to establish your worth, and just be like loud and annoying about it, isn't really healthy, and that says a lot about who you are. With that, humility, humility isn't needing to prove yourself in any way, shape, or form. Humility is being able to be the one humble, be the one that's just taking it day by day and not needing to prove it to anybody. You don't need to prove it to your friends, a girl, or just significant other, to be honest with you. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. But you should take it as a way of life. That's why, a lot of people follow some sort of faith, some sort of ethic code, and I'm not trying to tell you, or I'm not trying to sit here and tell you, I gotta, you gotta pick up you gotta be religious, this, that. No, like I don't, religion is for those who need it, and for those whose way, or for those who find religion gets to that point, I view that as like very private, but, disregarding that, and just, not getting on that topic, ego is a harsh thing, and it's almost like a drug, because once you hit a brick wall, you don't really know what to do. And that, connecting it back to Marcus Aurelius, he had a great point where when you are, when you give everything to your ego, and when you hit a brick wall, and when you have nothing else to you, you got to be reborn as a person, and it's a very harsh reality. It's the harsh reality of being able to suck up your mess that you made, and being able to grow from that. But nowadays, we don't really talk about that because a lot of us, including myself, can be prideful at times. You know, I'm working on it, and you know, not trying to talk about me, but you know, I had a bunch of anger issues when I was younger, and obviously, at a young age, you don't really know what you're doing. You could barely even, talk. But when you grow older, you should really take into account that you should also be the better person and bigger person, because you don't want to win every argument. There's no championship fight to win an argument. You know, you may get that satisfaction and be like, that'll tell them, but you don't need that. You really don't. You know, obviously, it's good to debate. It's good to have philosophical conversations, but when it's a conversation that leads to nothing, there's nothing to gain. Now, towards the end of the video, I'm not going to give you the cheesy, just think positive talk, but I will say some things that you can do to reduce this feeling of lost hope or not being able to think clearly, which I would say reduce social media, go outside more, spend time with family or friends, and overall just don't be a slave to your phone. And I know adults, your parents or your older sisters or siblings would say like, oh, get off that phone, which in actuality, this whole time that we actually should have listened to them. And we've become so glued to it where we just made things normal. Like, we just made things that are not normal, and I don't really like that. So go outside, go to a random place, go get like a food or something, go chalk it up with somebody at a restaurant or something like that. Not saying you have to flirt with them, but just be positive, be kind, and be nice. It's really, and I hate to say it, but it's really not that hard because I've been doing that way more recently. Example, but definitely get better at in-person interaction rather than being used to the phone. And I know you've probably seen hundreds of videos being like, oh, you need to be like, you just need to reduce the phone, exercise. No, you just do what you do, and whether or not it's just beneficial, but do not bring yourself into a deeper hole, and don't hurt others around you. And that's easier said than done, of course, but you should definitely make your choices wisely and consider the consequences that come with them, whether it be good or bad. Also, learning how to tolerate with embarrassment and failure is very beneficial to one's well-being, because obviously we look back at moments that we had in our life very young and just like phases and like all that. I wouldn't even consider them failures, but they are to some people embarrassed, and I get embarrassed when I see some photos, young photos of myself, and I know it sounds dramatic, but I feel like if you just become a better person over time and learn from your mistakes, it's way better. And obviously easier said than done, 110%, but you shouldn't let your past define your future. Every sinner has a past, and every saint, the quote goes, every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. And I saw that on the internet somewhere, to be honest. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, no, it's dope. But yeah, honestly, redeem yourself, and honestly, don't let the shackles of your failures, whether it be a failed test or you doing drugs, or you accidentally cause harm to yourself or to the people you love. You shouldn't like view your failures as something that like they're permanent scars on your body. You shouldn't view that as that. You should use them as a learning curve. And obviously millions of people said that, and people that David Goggins probably said something like that. Honestly, no hate towards him, I'm just saying him as an example. But always use your failure as a learning curve. You shouldn't let failure like eat you and dissect you and all that stuff. So with that being said, today was like my first video essay, and I thought teens mental health was very good. So I hope you guys enjoy today's video, as I always say. And I'll be back to regular programming. I just thought, you know, I wanted to dip my toes on the video essay area. So yeah, I know I haven't been posting as much, but I'll get back to regular programming soon. So see you guys then.